This is Coach Jason Ballard, and I'm a business wingman. Over the years, I've learned a lot from working in our family construction business, serving as a senior officer in the United States Air Force, and running 12 different organizations around the world. Many people helped me get to where I am today, and it's my mission in life to serve as a personal wingman to others. That's what this podcast is all about, providing knowledge, tools, resources, and mentorship to help people soar to their highest altitude. Welcome back to the Soar Higher podcast. This is your host, Coach Jason Ballard. Really excited to be with you today. Got a really great, intriguing, and timely topic to talk about with you today. And we've got an absolute pro on the show that's going to talk us through leadership. We're going to be talking about the current dynamic of leadership and in being challenged in this 2025 year that we just started off. A lot of stuff going on in the workforce. A lot of leaders are leaving. I just read an article the other day that about 30% of the C-suite leaders right now are leaving C-suite level roles. They're just overwhelmed with all kinds of burnout, and just they're overwhelmed and just dealing with the dynamic challenges of today, of the economy, the different dynamic of people in the workforce, different generations and expectations, and just the speed for which we are doing things in the workforce is just, for a lot of people who are really good people that are good leaders, is just burning them out. And so we're going to be digging into certain aspects of leadership today. But I want to introduce you to our guest. He's not only a good friend of mine. We both served in the Air Force together. We unfortunately weren't assigned together to work. I wish we would have been, but we did serve together. We just served in different places and in a little bit different times. An amazing guy. He's the founder and president of Shawn Dawley, which is an inspired leadership organization where he provides keynote speaking, motivational speaking, training workshops, and coaching on all aspects of leadership for companies all over the world. Companies like Humana, Texas Roadhouse, Chevrolet, just to name a few. His leadership expertise is derived from his extensive background from the military, serving as a combat pilot in the U.S. Air Force, retiring from the military, working in the corporate sector, and working with people all over the country and all over the world. He's an amazing leader, an amazing person that's just doing some fantastic stuff out there. So without further ado, let me introduce Shawn Dawley to the show. Shawn, welcome, man. Good to have you.
Thank you, Jason. Goodness gracious, man, you set the bar pretty high. I appreciate you selectively picking only the highlights of my life, so far, that you left out all the junk that really is much more of an interesting story. But no, I appreciate the invitation to be back, Jason.
Well, this is Shawn's second time on the podcast. He's just doing some phenomenal stuff, and the conversations out there in the workforce are just becoming more and more dynamic as things go. And I thought he just has so much knowledge, so much experience that he could share some of his most recent work and working with his clients in different ways to help and make sense of some of the stuff that's going on. And so, Shawn, just to kind of catch people up to speed on a little bit about you, talk a little bit about your background and how did you get into coaching and keynote speaking and those kind of things. So kind of let us learn a little bit about you and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, yeah, very quickly, and with no false modesty, absolutely atrocious K through 12 student, and not much of an athlete. So, enlisted in the Air Force at 17 after my recruiter fudged a couple of things from my juvenile interactions with law enforcement, and then was an aircraft mechanic on KC 135s. And I've said this to many people unapologetically. I was not a very good mechanic. I just lack a strong mechanical aptitude. But working on planes by day, then going to college by night, taking advantage of the military's tuition reimbursement program. Got a degree in aeronautics after about 4 years. And though I couldn't fix planes, the Air Force decided to give me the keys and let me fly them. So after pilot training, spent the preponderance of my 20 years in functionally as a pilot. And as you know, and what the audience may need to kind of fill this out, when I was not in an operational assignment, either flying planes or commanding flying squadrons, as a pilot and a commander, I had a couple of, career broadening opportunities on different staffs around the world. Did a little bit of work as a congressional liaison for our association, and then spent a year on the faculty and staff at the Harvard Kennedy School for Public Policy. So the graduate program at Harvard, I was a full-time resident there. Uh, Dealing with like leadership and national security issues. Then, after retired from the military, went into the corporate world. Wasn't looking to set the corporate world on fire, but once again, kind of stumbled my way up the leadership ranks and ended up in the proverbial head shed before I finally decided just to rip the band aid off and operationalize this idea that I had been whiteboarding for about 10 years. So, in a nutshell, I had some jobs early on in the Air Force that required me to speak in front of small crowds. And I, through hook or crook, just kind of got better at it, got good enough to survive the stage because my first audiences were like older type A alpha aviators. And so they're not a very like warm and accommodating crowd. So that forced me to get as good as I possibly could to survive the snake pit. And then on the other half of the equation, the effort was always there, but I definitely stumbled my way up the leadership ranks, and I learned a lot along the way. But at some point, I realized if all of these men for whom I have a great degree of respect keep elevating me into higher and higher leadership positions, I've got to be doing something right. Despite the things I'm doing wrong, I've got to be doing something right. And so I thought, well, I've learned how to hold an audience's attention, and I've probably learned a thing or two about leadership as the units that I oversaw went from the tens to the hundreds to the thousands. And so I thought, well, despite all the mistakes I made, or maybe because of those, might I be able to put that together? And that's when I started my own leadership consulting firm, where, consulting is kind of a loaded term. What I mostly do is provide keynotes to large crowds or much more interactive and more intimate workshops for 10 to 100. And it could be a room full of leaders or an entire department where it's from the chief all the way down to your frontline workers. So I kind of bounce between the two. And then once in a while, somebody will walk up and like, hey, do you ever work one-on-one with people? And I'm like, sometimes, but that's usually just people in the senior most executive ranks because of like the price point, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, what makes you like public speaking? I've seen you speak a few times, and I am a follower of yours. I see you doing some great things out there. What is it about being on that stage, man? You just kind of become a not a different person, but you just kind of light up. You just get in a zone, man. When you get up there, you're like in a rhythm, and it just flows, and it's natural, and you just kind of light up when you're out there speaking. What about that just made you say, I want to get up and do that every day, man? That just makes me feel good. What I'm just curious of how you thought about that.
No, man, that's a great question. And it's one I get relatively often. So, again, this is not Sean pretending to be humble. I failed speech in college. I was, my grades were fine. I was just too scared when it came to the final at the end of the uh, semester to get up in front of the entire class of 40. So up until that point, the instructor had broken it down into like three groups of like 13 or 14. But for the final, um, on the way to give my speech, which I would, 5 to 7 minutes, I would have passed. I was just too scared to do it. And so um, In any psychometric battery that I've ever taken, I always peg that thing hardcore introvert. Being on stage is draining to me. And so if you were to ask me, do you like the stage? My answer would be like, yes and no. Intrinsic joy from being on stage is not something that I necessarily find. It is in being given this just awesome opportunity and privilege to spend other people's time that they will never get back, but hopefully do it in such a way that even if the messenger is quickly forgotten, did I bring my absolute best that perhaps the message landed with one or a few or most or all the audience? And so if you ask me, do I like it? Yeah, maybe. But do I love the opportunity that it affords me? Absolutely. Because again, if I'm given 45 minutes or an hour for a keynote and there's however many, 100 or 1,000, whatever the case may be, um, that is a once in a lifetime opportunity for probably for that group. And so whatever my best is, they deserve every bit of it. And I do kind of get into the flow. Early on, I was trying really hard, and I tried to be polished to speak to the audience. But something magical kind of happens along the way, I think, in this profession. And at some point, I was able to start speaking with the audience. And it's hard to make that distinction between speaking to versus speaking with. But that energy that is on stage, it is all for them because as soon as that microphone goes hot, absolutely, I am the least important person in that room. I know that seems counterintuitive because the spotlight is literally on me, but it ain't about me. And so, anyway, I know I'm already getting long-winded on that, but it is such an awesome privilege if you are ever, whether it's your chance to spend 3 minutes addressing the school board, or it's your time to spend 10 minutes talking to your team to roll out a new strategy. Spending other people's time is both an honor and a responsibility that I think we should never overlook.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story. And you know, I think a lot of people, most people are afraid of public speaking. It's one of the top fears people have out there, getting in front of people, saying something wrong and, stumbling and mumbling and fumbling around. And, it's a big fear, right? And so I think that's a really great lesson for people to take away just already on this podcast is you can overcome those fears. You embraced this fear of getting in front of people and your shyness and introvertedness to embrace that and take that on as a challenge to where you studied that, you became a master of that, you deliver things like an absolute polished pro, right? You moderate your tone and you'll slow things down, you'll speed things up, you'll build suspense, and then you're part motivational at certain points and pumping people up, and then you kind of connect on a deeper level on a story that really kind of plays on emotion and really reinforcing the message, the real takeaway of what you're trying to talk about, which is, leadership or connecting, leaders with employees better and having hard conversations and not making it awkward and just, really getting into the meat of what's going on. And I see this all the time out there, Sean, in my line of work as a coach as well, is that people in leadership positions right now are struggling to engage. They're struggling to have the hard conversation and they lead by fear and avoidance and that's not leadership. And so I think that's a great lesson, in facing your fears, becoming the worst at something in your mind and becoming one of the best in something in your mind, with what you're doing. So appreciate that story. I think that's an amazing thing, and it comes through in your work.
Yeah. Well, no, thanks. I'm glad you noticed all that. I need to hire you as my hype man, because everything that you did, it's funny because everything that you were so kind as to provide me compliments on were measured objectives that I was trying to get to. And so I'm glad that at least now I know for a fact at least one person is picking up on the work, man, because that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, that's what I do, man. That's part of my secret sauce. When I work with people and coach people, I see things that they probably think about, but probably don't see in themselves. I see things that other people don't see, and I pick up on these things. And so, yeah, yeah, happy to you know provide you some feedback along the way. But you're just doing a phenomenal job, and so that kind of leads me to this next thing. Your purpose, your mission, right? I love your mission statement, like unlocking teams' power, passion, and purpose. Your focus, your sole purpose of getting up and waking up and giving a speech or riling up a crowd or doing training or doing coaching is to unlock somebody's potential, somebody's capabilities, and to create power and passion and purpose in people. Almost like you're unsticking them, like they're stuck, and you're that force that pulls them out of the mud and gets them to see things differently and think differently in bigger, better ways. So, talk to us more about this mission and this. How did you come up with that, and why did you land on power, passion, and purpose out of God knows how many things you could have landed on?
To some degree, did I maybe lean into one word because of its alliterative, PPP, right, right. But that being said, social media slogans, there's enough of that shallow crap out there, right? There's enough of those pithy little maxims. So it's not arbitrary. And probably the key word in all that is helping people unlock. There is nothing that I have that I can give to anybody. There is nothing that Shawn Dawley has that he can give to anybody that makes a bit of difference. It is about, in some meager way, helping them unlock what is already inside. I'm not going to be able to quote this in its original Italian, but Michelangelo was once asked how he carved David, and what he basically said was David was in there all along. I just had to chip away the pieces. And I will say that there's a lot of people, and perhaps even certain audiences, and I'm not going to pick on specific industries. I'm probably not their guy. If somebody is looking to scroll through and find a hack about how do I make more money, how do I get more women to come home with me, how do I fly first class on a private jet, I just may not be your guy. Because materialistic pursuit. I apologize for none of my material possessions. I like to live in a house. I'm thankful that I have a car to drive. But what I have kind of found for Shawn is that if I am driven to fulfill a purpose about which I am passionate, that maybe, just maybe, serves a higher calling, I find that it's more rewarding in the end, but it's also more sustainable along the journey. The way I am wired at my age now, if I woke up every day thinking, how do I get 1,000 more followers? How do I get 10,000 likes on a viral video? How do I get to $1 billion? That's just not enough to rev my engine. I just couldn't push forward ahead like that. So tying it back to, like you asked, how do you get on stage? In that moment, my purpose is to serve these people whose time has been entrusted to me. If I had to go on stage and talk for an hour about what an amazing badass I am, that would be the worst speech you've ever heard, because I could care less about that content. But if instead you say, Shawn, you've got these people for 45 minutes or an hour, you're never going to have a chance to talk to them again. What can you tell them so that when they walk out of here, in some small way, they are better off for it? Well, now you've given me a reason. You have given me a purpose to get onto that stage. And I have found that for most people, when it comes to unlocking their power, is if they are doing something that serves something other than themselves, there is probably a gear that they can find that they never even knew they had. If somebody is trying to do something for their own grandeur, eventually they will run out of gas. But if I have to leave the cave and kill something and drag it back to feed my family, come hell or high water, that is getting done because I'm serving people important to me, like my wife and children. And so, that's why I kind of came up with that. Like, are you passionate about this? Is there purpose in it, like real purpose? Because if so, you will find your power. If you know why you are doing something and for whom you are doing it, there's not any how that you probably cannot, figure out.
Yeah. Man, I think, kind of to play on one of your words, I think that's very powerful. I can see why power is one of the P words you chose. And certainly you're certainly passionate about that. And, so something or someone or a group of someone's ignited some things in you along the way to allow you to get to where you are today. And so being able to pass that on, I mean, you talked about, your value and what you're giving to people. Like, well, I can't really give people, a whole lot of stuff. I just get up there and talk about some stuff, and I hope they like it and they get it and it makes a difference. And I think, is a leader and a leadership disciple and a leadership coach and a leadership speaker, an authority, an expert, which you are, you just have to know in the back of your mind that, sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel about it, the mark you leave behind. I mean, you can say out of 45 minutes of talking and motivating people on the stage about a particular, aspect of the world we live in and leadership, you can say one golden nugget. You can say something a certain way and it just clicks with them. And that may be the only thing that they take away and they go tell their spouse at the dinner table that night. But that one thing could change everything in how they think. And if they leave there thinking differently, thinking bigger, thinking more deeply into things, thinking in a way where they're like, "Huh, I hadn't really thought about things like that. Boy, I wonder what would happen if I did do that. I wonder what would happen. This guy Sean, he sucked at talking and now he's great at talking. So I wonder what my hidden talents are, right? And just that curiosity can really ignite something in somebody that may take them to a whole nother place that you may never even know happened.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. And you had hit a key phrase in there about passing it along. So I turned 50 not too long ago, and so I think the average American actuarial would say that my life is statistically about 2/3 of the way over. Right, like so, take my life as a pie chart, and though I am not promised tomorrow, and I could live to be 100, mathematically, I probably have two yesterdays for every like one tomorrow. Right, like that's how the math kind of works out. And so I feel like, even though I enlisted in the Air Force at 17, there was a lot of training. And then, as a young mechanic, I needed older guys to kind of carry me. And then with the college degree that I got because professors poured into me, then I get to pilot training. I mean, really, until I was about 25, in large measure, the world around me was investing in me. It could have been an instructor pilot when I was 23. It could have been a little league coach when I was 8. It could have been the seventh grade teacher who had to stay after school because I was in detention and she had to sit there for an hour and watch me. But all these other people for the first third of my life had been pouring into me. Now, there was times I was carried along the way after that, and there's times I carried others. And so I feel like, from 25 to 50, I at least kind of held my own weight. Like I felt like I at least could punch within my own weight class. And therefore, the way I kind of look at my life as a math problem, if for the middle 25 years I could hold my own, but for the first 25, a legion of people had poured into me. If I am blessed to have 25 more years, if I do not spend that paying forward what other people gave me, shame on me. Shame on me for being a taker, not a giver, because I can't pay back the seventh grade teacher who had to stay after school for an hour to sit in detention with me, right? I can't pay her back, but maybe I can pay forward her legacy by trying with my meager ability to, invest in other people. And so, if I hit that $1 billion Powerball, though I've cashed every check a client has given me, I would do this for free. Don't tell anybody that, but I would do this because it is just such a privilege.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure is. And, I think you just underscore one of the most important aspects of leadership. Leaders are really about three things, right? If you really want to break leadership down, read all the books, read all the, articles and Forbes and Inc. and all the, you want to look at everything leadership. It really boils down to these three simple things, right? Leaders motivate and influence people to do things to the point where they take ownership of it themselves, right? Number two, leaders grow new leaders. And number three, leaders set people up for success. And so everything you're talking about in your work underscores those three principles of motivating people, sparking this fire, this energy, this passion in them, right? In pouring into them to build them up, because guys like us that are in our 50s, we're on the tail end of our careers. We've done some great things and have a lot to be thankful for, but the weight of the world is not on our shoulders as much as it used to be, right? We've got to pass that off. And you doing these things you're talking about is setting people up for success, right? Where we can take the lessons that were taught to us, we can take that on top of the lessons we've created for ourselves and mistakes we've made and things like that, and pass that along so they don't go backwards and have to learn all that from scratch. It's like, I look at it this way, if I'm working with a client and I don't do the things that I'm doing with them, and then they go off and do something goofy that I know better, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, I could have told you that was going to happen. I don't know why you did it that way. And they're like, well, wait a minute, you've been there and done that. You already knew that was going to fail. Yeah, I saw that coming. I just didn't know what you were gonna do about it, and they're like, "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you make me go down this path and suffer?" Like, that's not setting people up for success, right? So, I love that, in you, Sean, and so I wanna switch gears. You are being asked to speak in front of people every single week. You're coaching people every single week. You're doing some incredible things all over the country. Every time I, see some of the stuff you're doing, you're in a different town talking about, some very important things going on. And so I want to hear from you on what are some of the most important things people are coming to you for when they're asking you to speak, when they're asking you to do workshops and asking you to do the things you're doing. What are some of the most important things that you keep getting hit with, and why do you think that is?
Yeah. Man, great, insightful question, Jason. So, my audiences, some are more of a natural fit than others, but basically, I would just quickly say, regardless of the company, the profession, the industry, everything I deal with are just rudimentary interpersonal dynamics. That's And so you could be at a restaurant, and to the left of you and right of you are two tables. One is a road construction crew, one are a bunch of attorneys from a white shoe law firm. And if you strip away the vocabulary that is peculiar to each profession, they are talking about the exact same stuff. There's only so many interpersonal dynamics. Well, Bob doesn't carry his weight on the crew. Well, Mary doesn't carry her caseload in the firm. I mean, it's the exact same stuff. And so the principles that I have tried to capture and now convey, and to your point, because smarter people than me gave them to me, or I found my way into them after doing it wrong the first 10 times, they have like universal applicability. Right now, I may massage it a little bit on the margins if I'm talking to a road construction industry on Monday, but I'm talking to an association of corporate lawyers on a Wednesday, and in both instances, I'm talking about, let's say, change. The fundamental principles do not change, but a little bit around the margins, I'm going to massage it. And so what I have found is that 2/3 of the most requested keynotes or topics for workshops are change. That's a big one. Something that I talk about called letting go, that it kind of sort of hits on a little bit of imposter syndrome, but basically, people holding themselves back. Uh, and then difficult conversations, like how to effectively communicate under stress. And so, to answer the second half of your question, why is it that so many different companies and industries keep asking me, without me funneling them to it, to talk about change, becoming your quote unquote, hashtag best self, and how to communicate, and have hard, crucial conversations. The change is because, as fast as change is right now, it'll probably never be this slow again. I mean, everywhere you look around, culturally, politically, economically, financially, socially, legally, infrastructure, technology, it's every time you turn around, change, change, change. And I think for some people, sometimes, but eventually for all of us, intellectualizing our way through change is the easy part. It is emotionally absorbing the constant instability of the world always being in flux. And so I may walk into a healthcare company, I may walk into a financial industry meeting, I may walk into a logistical operation, and they're all dealing with change. And so I've got a lot of material on that because that one comes up quite a bit. And I help them sort of unpack the problem, help them understand what it is causing within them and then within their organization. And then, to the leaders, I say, here are three things that you need to be very conscientious of if you want people to shift from merely surviving it to actually thriving in it. Because if your competitor is surviving it, but you're thriving it, that same change that you both had to, handle may have just created a competitive advantage for you because they're just paddling to keep their head above water, and now you're stroking and moving down the pool. So that's a big one. So I think that's why there's just so much. Just the quantity of change is overwhelming. The second one about letting go, I am nobody's therapist. I would never tell somebody that they are or are not allowed to be dealing with stress and anxiety and feeling like the moment is too big and they're too small. But I will say that if we look at macro level data, so forget about any individual analysis, which I cannot do. I'm just going to look at the CDC reports, which tell me that every single year in this country, more Americans are being prescribed antidepressants, medication for anxiety, ADD, ADHD. More people are reporting self loathing, disconnectedness, isolation, suicidal ideation is on the rise. And so, if you think about if that is happening at a macro level in a country of 340 million, is it really that surprising that a lot, and even disproportionately more so, younger workers are feeling unequipped for the responsibilities that lie ahead of them? Like, is it not hard now to imagine why resiliency is probably not nearly what it was in 1945? So and again, this is not me singling anybody out, but the idea that I keep walking into these venues populated with so many accomplished people who are understandably feeling kind of, sort of, maybe I dare say fragile. Like, I don't know that I'm worthy of this title. My team thinks I'm Wonder Woman. I don't know how I'm going to get through the day. And so I've found it interesting that that continues to come up. And that's one I can relate to. Like I shared with you about, like, look, I was a scared to death speaker. Like I know what it's like to be outwardly observed as walking confidence, but inwardly feel like you're about to, have a meltdown. Like I get it, get it. And then finally, the one that I get asked to do a lot on difficult conversations, communicating under stress, is that Through the magic of smartphones, 8.4 billion people have basically volunteered for a social experiment about which we have no longitudinal analysis. And it has collectively just eroded our ability to communicate face to face. Whether it's us sounding like cantankerous old men saying, "Oh, these kids are on their phone all day," or the rise, at least up until now, in remote work and things like that. You'll have two people in their 40s. They're both directors or VPs. They both have MBAs, and they don't know how to confront each other over a professional problem because eh, I've never had to do that. I've never had to have a confrontational conversation, so I just choose to avoid it and just hope it magically goes away. And so in that one, I let people down easy and say, listen, the way you are neuroanatomically wired, we are predisposed to avoid conflict. Like it is a sociopath that actually relishes conflict, right? Like we've got reality shows that basically focus around that. Like Real Housewives of fill in the blank. Normal people don't relish conflict, but if you are in a professional working environment, either you figure out how to deal with that conflict, or you let it corrode your soul from the inside out. It's an unavoidable reality, right?
Yeah, lack of action, lack of decision is a decision, right? You're choosing to disregard things. And so when your people are looking at you as a leader, not dealing with a problem, not dealing with, holding people accountable, with dealing with toxicity or dealing with, the payroll didn't get run or whatever the challenge may be, like people are watching you and they're observing this behavior, and so lack of a decision or lack of an action, is a decision and an action, and people will respond to that accordingly, and that will create frustration, confusion, and it just creates more problems for you, right? Lack of engagement doesn't, okay, well, I avoided it today, yeah, but instead of dealing with, you're dealing with a problem that's, like the size of a raccoon, a week later, now it's the size of a grizzly bear, and now it's a bigger, tougher, harder problem to solve,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. If
And
you thought that
and that's no
conversation
fun
was going
for
to be hard
anybody.
last week, now,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And so it's interesting that, a lot of these, hot topic things you talked about, conflict and just letting things go and expectations and building teams and, these dynamics you just described. I'm not surprised to hear that they're, consistently top of mind things people want addressed and discussed. But the fascinating thing is how they're interrelated, right? Like one thing, is connected to another, it's connected to another. And I just find it fascinating that really the root of all this is expectations. So the expectation is that the world, well, okay, we get through the next 2 weeks of doing X, Y, and Z, a company merger, or we get through the next 2 weeks of this big project, we get through the next, amount of time working on an implementation of some new software, IT stuff or whatever, and things will calm down, things will settle down, and everything will be fine. But the reality is there something else behind it? Like business is like being at the beach. There's constantly a motion of waves coming in from, the depths of the ocean into the shoreline, right? Like the waves never stop coming in. There's always activity, there's always things going on in the business sector. And the pace for which we are changing is rapidly increasing. I think people are having a hard time accepting that. Like like I was at a function about a year ago, and there was a guy that he was his title was futurist, and he laid out a very methodical, detailed case of why the world is moving faster and very compelling. I don't have time to talk about it here on the show, but the end result was more change is going to happen in the next 15 years than the past 150 combined, meaning the speed of the change is just, getting faster and faster. I mean, you look at the smartphones, you had your smartphone out a minute ago, the rate for which those things changed, I mean, that's like every 4 or 5 months, and that's getting faster and faster and faster too, and the technology, take a look at things like AI. I read something the other day where AI is tripling in capabilities every 6 months, right? How the heck do you deal with that? How do you run the fort? How do you keep the people paid? How do you make sure people, are authorized to go on leave and you're doing your day to day stuff of serving customers and working as a team and having increasing disruption to the workforce that you have to not only manage, but ideally get out in front of that so it doesn't happen to you, it happens with you, right? And I think that is a hard thing for people to comprehend. And so I'm just curious of your thoughts. Like these expectations build um, drives change, and people's ability to recognize that and plan for that and talk about that drives their anxiety and stress, which drives them getting behind, which drives them to quitting or giving up or seeing no light at the end of the tunnel, which is where a lot of people are today. And so, how do you, Shawn Dawley, talk to people about that dynamic? What are some of the tips and tricks and um, you know, uh, methods that you may give people in these situations to break that cycle?
We have the same neural network and anatomical structure as our hunter gatherer ancestors. Like neuroanatomically and physiologically, we're no different than as one who believes that God, created man in His own image. Our our hunter gatherer ancestors from 10,000 years ago are genetically identical to us. So we have hunter gatherer physiology, and we are operating essentially in uh, Renaissance era institutional structures. I mean, if you look at like how the world is constructed, companies, et cetera, it's basically the same as the Napoleonic staff of the early 1800s. And we are now leveraging technology that is so far advanced that it is becoming almost magic in its characteristics. And those three things are just not compatible. So I will tell you, I have an extraordinarily pessimistic view of our trajectory because we are cavemen operating with medieval style institutions, but we are now in possession of technology that it's almost as if it was given to us by Olympian gods. And so, what I tell people, and I'll tease that this comes out in the final part of a 4-part book that I'm in the middle of writing. There's some amount of surrender that we're just going to have to accept. We are not engineered to peacefully live in the world that we are constructing around us. And so this is like antithetical, to a world that wants me to wear smart clothing where, like I'm getting real time biometric feedback that's going to go to a server in China that's going to tell me how much sleep I need to get tonight. We're just not built for that. Like there's a reason that some of the mammals at SeaWorld have to be prescribed, Paxil because they're not built to live in those, tanks, right? We're not built to live the life that we're living. And so what I recommend to people is as much as possible, stay and remain disconnected from technology. It is next to impossible to feel anxious and ungrounded walking through the forest, listening to the sound of a babbling brook. We were born into a state of nature. When we are in nature, we are home. When we are in downtown Tokyo, that we are in an environment for which we were not built. When we are having a face-to-face conversation, staring somebody in the eye, we are in tune with our nature. When we're texting back and forth emojis, we are engaging in something for which we have not been physiologically engineered. And so I'll show you like my smartphone here. You can see the picture. This is it. Like I've got, I can make phone calls, I can send text, and I can use the map function, and I can listen to Spotify at the gym. No social media, none of that, because it is just too inconsistent with our nature. And so again, I'm I,
That
I'm
creates
pushing for a
perceptions
locked
and
pill.
yeah.
Nobody wants to hear that. I get it. Nobody's buying what I'm selling, but I'm just saying, if you feel like your world is spinning out of control, you need to start changing parts of your world. The magic may not come in another pharmaceutical intervention. Like, what can you start cutting out of your life? Because if you are telling me that you are overwhelmed, either you are internally deficient, which is probably not the case, or you are being externally stressed by something or some people. So cut, 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 cut.
Yeah, you've lost the capability to deal with that much stuff. And so either you raise your ceiling to be able, with education or training or whatever, to be able to deal with all the stuff going on personally and professionally, or you have to, take a step back and reduce something to get that back into control, right? I wrote down two words, Sean. I think this is really about control, meaning gaining control of yourself and your life and where your thoughts and emotions are. And if you're stressed and under pressure and all of those things, well, then get it back in control, right? Reduce your time on social media. We can't get away from technology. It's around us everywhere we
Yeah,
go, whether we're
we're
in
on it right
restaurants or,
now.
and we're on it right now, doing a video and audio podcast. And but minimize. You can reduce your amount of time on social media. You know, you can control what you're seeing on social media, and maybe the input coming in derives the output of your thoughts and feelings, right? So change the input mechanisms. The other thing, in addition to control and taking more control of yourself, is prioritization, right? Prioritize the things you need to prioritize: your health, your diet, your sleep, your quiet time, and putting the phone away for certain times during the day and night, right? Um, Prioritize your life, your family, your hobbies. Go, if you like, I know Sean has a boat. He goes out on the lake a lot in the summers and skis and wakeboards and all the stuff that he does, and just find ways to engage life and nature and all the things that God has created to round yourself out in life, to where you're not just focus on technology or the things that are coming through the technologies. I think, if people can get that as a key takeaway, I think that could be a great place to start with them, Sean. So as we kind of depart today, any final thoughts on that? As one important takeaway: if people are struggling, people are stressed, people are struggling with some conflict or dealing with conflict or avoiding things in life, what's one thing you want to reinforce as we kind of conclude today's show that they can take away as high value today?
Maybe to tie then to what we just concluded, if I am in need of a hack, maybe I will scroll. But if I'm in need of wisdom, I will read. And because we have been like almost rewired to think in 10-second TikTok style sound bites, it'll feel awkward if it's been a while since you have actually read. Don't be surprised if it feels awkward. But in any given day, we can spend our time in the shallows or we can spend our times in the depths, but probably not both. And so I would just challenge people. It's a rhetorical question, but if you have ever scrolled for an hour, scroll, 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 at the end of that hour, do you feel better or worse? Do you feel better or worse about how than you did an hour prior? But if you read for an hour, if you deliberately, like with purpose, engage in something that's going to feed your mind and your soul, at the end of that, you've gone into the depths of something, and that will probably provide you an insight of wisdom that will make it maybe not just easier to get through the day, but perhaps have some value to help you get through life. So if I'm going to hand out one bit of free advice, stop the scrolling, start the reading.
Yeah. I'll say it differently. Start learning and challenging yourself, and stop trying to entertain yourself to distract yourself, right? This thing about distraction and entertaining and watching funny videos. I mean, that's all good and well, but invest your time in learning and developing and challenge yourself on a deeper level. And I think that can, just really kind of wash all of the thoughts out of your mind, and help you consistently being reset, and have a mental break. So, Sean, thank you so much for being on the show, man. I feel like we just kind of scratched the surface, and it's always just awesome to have you. I mean, I feel like we can go on for another. We can have like a Joe Rogan show and talk for 3 hours. But appreciate all the great work you do. Sean, how do people find you? What's the best way to contact you to get you to come in and help them with some speaking and training and things?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. So the easiest way is just to go to my website, and then from there, any number of emails or contacts or social media links are available. So that website is my name, ShawnDawley.com, ShawnDawley, ShawnDawley.com, and then we can get together and take it from there.
Awesome. Thank you for that. We're also going to put that in the show notes. So if you're listening to the show, or watching the show on whatever platform you listen to it, you can just click in there, find his link to his website, connect with him. Highly recommended. He's an outstanding speaker, connects with people on a real genuine level, not some kind of speaker that gets up there and rants and raves and shows, a bunch of funny videos. I mean, he really does connect. He breaks things down and really just makes it, easy to understand, and just get some real true value of the crazy world we live in these days. And so that's it for today's show, folks. You don't want to miss next week's show. Next week, where we've got a guest on the show. He's a seasoned CEO. He's going to be talking about some things he's recently chronicled in his new book. We're talking about professional drinking and entertaining, and how to turn any event into a game changing opportunity for you and your business. This is going to be fun and entertaining, and enlightening, but powerful at the same time. So you don't want to miss that. That's it for today. Have a great one, everybody.